what I'm going to try and do is cut through all of this hype. I'm not going to try and sell you on the benefits of data. What I'm going to try and do is tell you a story. And I don't know if, guys, you can throw that presentation up, but the story is a pretty simple story. It's going to be myths, mistakes, and madmen as it relates to data. And I say that because there is a lot of hype and it's hard to know where to start. And I want to focus on where we've been and some of the things that we've learnt. And in many ways, this is a difficult journey. It's a very difficult journey. Now, I want to start, like any good marketer, with a disclaimer, and particularly coming out of financial services, we're not bad at disclaimers. And my first disclaimer really is that I cannot confess to being an expert on data, and I'm not. And my company is not a leader in data. We're not. We would describe ourselves as explorers. We make ground, we get lost occasionally, we find some gold occasionally, we suffer some setbacks occasionally, but above all, we know we have to keep going. We are pushing through and we are determined to learn, and that is the core of what we're trying to do. Now, data for us is pretty important, and it's pretty important because our business model looks like this. We've got 15 brands in 3 categories and the better part of 9 million customers. The core of this model is that these brands are appealing to different segments of customers. We're developing and building experiences for customers which they value and connect with, but you don't do that without data, and you don't do that without insight. And so for us, this is really important. So I'm not saying we're brilliant at it, but I'm more than comfortable sharing where we've learnt some things along the way. To get started, I just wanted to share, I guess, 3 insights. In fact, I think there's only 3 things I really want to leave you with. The first is that data is disruptive. It disrupts value chains, it disrupts business models, certainly disrupts customer experience. And what that means, I guess, from my perspective, is that there's a once-in-a-generational opportunity for marketers to be at the pointy end of that. I think marketers not only have the opportunity, they have the obligation to be able to lead their businesses through what will be increasingly accelerating change, driven by both data and digital. And I suspect if marketers aren't at the pointy end of that, many companies will not survive. The business models are going to be so tested and so disruptive. Data is the bullet, digital is the gun at the end of the day, but these models, a lot of the models, and I'll talk about this a bit later, are models that are founded on very old archetypes. They're founded on business models that came out of the industrial age, and they will not stand the test of time. It's just a reality. But having said that, my second point I'd like to leave you with today is that data isn't the panacea for all evils. It is not a miracle cure, and data is simply a means to an end. And that end, in my mind, is solving customer problems. If you solve customer problems, do that well. If you can deliver experiences that solve problems, then at the end of the day, the path to profit and growth will come. It will fly. The third point I want to leave you with today is it's really not about the technology. It's not even about the data. It's not about the techniques to interrogate that data. I think, and Creel, I think, set this up really well. It's ultimately about your organisation's ability to know what questions to ask. And when you get those answers from those questions, what the hell are you going to do with them? Can you actually do anything about it? Which I think is interesting, Creel, to your point. You have to think entrepreneurially about this information. It's not going to be self-evident, and there's no point gaining these insights but doing nothing about it. So I'm going to talk a lot about what that means for an organisation. We're learning that. We're not good at it yet. We've made, some ground, but also made some mistakes along the way. So I think in thinking about data as disruptive, it's useful. I find a sort of simple framework that I have in my head because there is, again, so much technical babble there. For me, it's useful to think about the drivers of data. And ultimately, there's only 3 drivers of data. Data either comes from enterprises, it comes from humans, or it comes from machines. The data that comes from enterprises, nothing too much new. I don't think there's a lot to talk about there. It's new, only from the point of view of a lot of what was sitting in analogue or paper form is now digitised. But ultimately, a lot of that information is relatively stable. It's a little easier to get. We store a lot more of it. I mean, the cost to store has gone from over $1,000 a megabyte over 10 years ago to half a cent a megabyte now. So you can certainly store a lot of information as a company. But what's much more interesting, I think, are the second two, human and machines, because that's what's driving the explosion in data. Humans interesting because humans are the ultimate analog device. I mean, we are analog machines, and almost everything that came from humans was analog until recently. No longer true. A lot of what was speech, body language, behaviour is now text, video, social. So a lot of what was analog is now digital. And of course, that's growing really quickly, as you are well aware. Machine is the next growth. It's there, but it's nowhere near its zenith at this stage. The sheer number of sensors, the sheer number of logs and things that connect around the Internet of Things, if you like, the volume of data there is bewildering. You can't see it, but the opportunities there are relatively substantial. So ultimately, data is only coming from these three sources, but it's really the second two that are making the difference, and the third one right now that is growing really quickly. Now, what that means at the end of the day is, this is a funny presentation. It's dropping stuff off. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back a bit. You'll see three things come out of this. The volume of data increases, the velocity of data increases, and the variety of data increases. Big deal. Volume is really not that interesting. So there's a lot of data, big deal. At the end of the day, what it really means for your company is rather than managing terabytes of data, you're probably managing petabytes or even over time zettabytes of data. You know, big is really not that insightful. Variety is very insightful. The types of disparate information, both structured and unstructured. And a lot of that, of course, is coming from human and machine. The variety is a challenge to manage. Your organisation is used to managing things that are very rational, ones and zeros, binary in nature. Now you've got a lot of unstructured data, a lot of text, a lot of semantic mining that you would need to do to find context within that. Also interesting, but the thing I think that's most interesting, which for some reason is not appearing on the slide there, is velocity. The point is that this stuff is moving so fast, what will really test you as a company, because it's testing us, is speed. To do something with information, you need to be able to sort of keep pace with that information, because it goes stale really quickly. So if you see something that comes from human or machine, that's happening right now, and if you want to react to that, you need to react to it right now and do something with it. Velocity is a big challenge. It tests companies because you don't just have to have the technology, you have to have some decision-making frameworks. You actually have to be ready to make decisions. As Creel said earlier, you can't just sit back and let this thing sort of roll and make your decision over a week or something. You need to be able to do that in pretty close to real time. So what this all means, I think at the end of the day, is there are three new realities that we see. And the first is around business models. I mean, if you think of the human sort of evolution, I think we had almost 2,000 years of feudalism, and there were business models that sat on those feudal systems. And then we had 200 years of the industrial age. The majority of our business models today are sat on industrial age business models. And it was only 10 or 15 years ago that we entered into an information age. And there are very few business models that are purpose-built for that age. The one that stands out most, I think, is information asymmetry. A lot of business models, particularly in financial services, but in a lot of other areas, are built on the premise that companies and brands have more information than their customers. This is asymmetrical. And that allows, to be honest, companies to exploit that opportunity where customers don't know as much. So whether it's buying a car, buying a home loan, what the price of my insurance is, that is built on your company, your big enterprise having a lot of data, and companies having to take what you say for granted and as gospel. That's no longer true and has very, very big implications for brands. If you look at what governments are doing now here and in the US, you will see huge amounts of data that governments held being now open source, being available, and new business models are flowing off the back of that. There's incredible amounts of data that now will be available that you simply couldn't have conceived of before. That is building new business models that will change a lot of your businesses. The ones that I think are going to be most relevant going forwards are actually a mixture of human and machine. And if I think about that, I think it was only 10 years ago that mankind mapped and understood and developed the human genome. So I think it was only 2003 where you could map an entire DNA strand for a human. So that's only 10 years ago. Now today I can lick a stick and send that stick to Mountain View, California to a company called 23andMe, and they will map my genome. Now what that will tell me is exactly my genetic makeup, what I'm predisposed to, illnesses I might be predisposed to in the future. So imagine knowing that and having that information, and imagine that told me that I'm highly likely to become diabetic. Now imagine then if I could take a monitoring device and put that either just on my body or a chip under my skin that would help monitor that and ensure I don't become a diabetic. I mean, that's a mixture of human and machine. So there will be huge amounts of data that will come from that, and that will open up opportunities everywhere. If you can think about that as an FMCG business and having access to that information as someone who understood that and wanted to eat foods or have a lifestyle that ensured that they were able to manage that. Or in our business, in life insurance and things like that, what we do today is we take a blood test. If you ever get life insurance, we take a blood test and you'll see that, it'll see a little window. In the future, you'll have much more information than we will. So this changes the balance of information. So as brands, we're going to have to be very comfortable with customers knowing more. We're going to have to share much more of our own data. We're going to have to repackage that data in ways that actually solve customer problems. The second part of this is that, as you know, this is now, consumers have a mindset that is now. This is bred and rusted on a mindset that I want to be able to do things now. And I think it's more than just instant gratification. I think this is people looking for meaning in interactions, which gives them control, makes them feel like they've done the right thing, they've made the right decision. It's going to be very challenging for brands to keep up, because ultimately you've got to be able to use your information quickly so that people have that sense of now, and they're making not just fast decisions but better decisions. And from those decisions and those interactions, they take meaning out of that. The third thing I would say, and it's a good follow-on from Creel's presentation, is innovation. I mean, the opportunities for marketers to innovate beyond marketing, to be able to take data and go back into your supply chain, take data, take it to your suppliers, and be able to change that supply chain, to be able to redefine the business that you're in and actually monetize adjacencies that are in those businesses. The opportunities for innovation are extraordinary. They generally tend to map with digital means as well, but there are opportunities beyond campaigns and marketing here that are so germane to us if we can see them. This has a big impact on marketers. It changes what we do, and it's all about more. We end up with more decisions. I mean, the number of decisions that you can now make with this data is logarithmic compared to where it was. You have so much data. So what does that mean? I think humans won't be able to make all of these decisions. To some degree, you're going to need machine learning. You're going to need machines who can make decisions, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of decisions. But how do you get the balance right between machines doing this and you doing it? You're going to have to do it much more quickly. And again, can you build an organisation that can run at this speed? You're going to have to deal with much more complexity. And that complexity is in attribution, what works and what doesn't. You're going to be dealing most likely right now with many more partners. We certainly are in this space. No one's expert. You've got a lot of partners. You're not managing yourself in an agency. There are a lot of partners that are playing into this, technology providers included. And internally, what we're seeing is the rapid convergence of IT, marketing and distribution. Those functions used to be sort of there and they would meet occasionally. Now, I've got to say, it's getting hard to pull those apart. The marketing channel is the IT program, the IT program is the distribution program, so that convergence of functions is a real challenge in organisations, and it'll be much harder, I think, for marketing departments to be, working with agencies, and that's what marketing does. I think that's now behind us. I want to just talk about three of the bigger myths that I think come out of this space. There are many, but three That's unraised. Is data a miracle cure? I read and see so much that just says, look, you guys invest in data, you know, the rest will take care of itself. I just can't see that data is a miracle cure. As I said, I think data is a means to an end, and that end is solving customer problems. And I think, look, data isn't information, and information's not insight. And really what we're trying to do here is to build experiences off the back of insights, stuff that matters to people, and build experiences that are going to be motivational for people around that. I think it's worth going back and even looking at the meaning of data. I mean, data is the plural of datum, which just happens to be a Latin word for dare, which means given. So the root of data is something given, an absolute given. Now, I don't see many things in my business that are givens that actually explain customer behaviour. There's a lot of dimensions to that, and givens aren't able to be monetised, to be quite frank, and they're not able to be used to create compelling experiences. So I don't think data is the panacea. I think there's a reason they talk about data mining in this area, and that is you've got to mine a lot of ore to find a little bit of gold. And that's no different here. You have got to mine a lot of data to get some information, to get a little bit of insight. And even if you get that, can you do something with it? And you kind of have to think all of that through so that you don't spend a lot of time mining ore and not get much out of it. The second myth is that this is a technology play. This is all about the technology. If you get the technology right, the rest will follow. I will say you definitely need to think through technology here, and marketers need to be much more comfortable with technology and conversant with technology than ever before. There are platforms, there are tools. As I said, it's too complex for humans to just do this. You can't plan this stuff. You can't plan it and push it out like campaigns. So you will need to understand technology. But technology and big investments in this are not going to guarantee success at all. In fact, could be the reverse. I would say if you have poor systems, and we have many of those, spending $100 million on those is no guarantee to success. You might move a bit slower than you'd like to, but at the end of the day, if you ask the right questions, you'll get a lot more out of just taking some of your own data and trying to speed it up perhaps than spending $100 million. A lot of this feels a lot like 10, 12 years ago with CRM systems, where literally hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on technology platforms that people didn't want to use, put garbage in, gave garbage out, had huge change management issues, all of the things that went with that. It feels a bit like that here. It feels a bit like if we rush and don't think this through, we'll do the same thing again. It'll just be called big data rather than CRM. This is just brilliant. The third myth is that more is better. And you probably see that, you know, if you're thinking about data programs, look, the more data you get, the more chance you've got of finding something that's valuable. You know, the more ore you put in, the more gold comes out. I mean, I'm pretty sure that doesn't work in mining, and I'm pretty sure that doesn't work in data either. I think what we've found to some degree is that the more data you bring together, you might find correlations, but you probably won't find causations. So ultimately, that's what you're trying to find, not just something that sort of, you know, looks like it's heading the same direction. You want to know that actually caused that. And there's no guarantee that more is better. I mean, he who has the most data doesn't win in this game. You can easily end up with haystacks with no needles, and there's nothing smart about that. You've got to manage your CEOs, your boards. You don't want to go in there with a big play that just sort of bets the farm, and you don't need to. I'm sorry, this looks like in Hebrew. I don't know why it's doing it, but a couple of years ago, look, we, like any other business in the service game, we were focused on digital and two facets of digital, creating continuous conversation. So no matter where you touch a brand, you can have that continuous conversation. Call it omni-channel, call it what you want. That's what we wanted to do digitally. We then wanted to create personalised experiences. Make the complex simple, make the simple fast, and tailor and personalise that, do as close to real time as you can. What you quickly find on those two though, you can only make incremental improvements in your digital strategy unless you're unlocking the power of your data. So that is the key enabler, and we pushed far down this side. We didn't get as far as we'd like because we have to get our data right to be able to suit that digital strategy. It's really hard to conceive of the next generation of digital experience without having your data there feeding it, because you're powering your digital experience with data. The way we did that at a macro level is 3 strategies. In our business, our raw material is capital. That's what we use. We use that to be able to create products and create experiences for our customers. We thought our assets were predominantly our brands and our people. We saw information and data as just that, information and data. We didn't really make a lot of ground until we kind of worked out that data is a major asset. And if we were to sell our business tomorrow, that's a big part of what someone would be paying a premium for. They'd be paying a premium to get access to that information. So we start to treat data like an asset. What that means is you need to invest in it. If you don't invest in it, it depreciates. All of those sort of things are important. You govern assets. You have a view of their value. And the way we got there, in a way, is rethinking our business. And we spent a lot of time looking at Kodak, Nokia, and all of those businesses, to your point earlier, Krill, that were flying and then somehow missed something. And we were worried we're missing what business we're actually in. Are we actually in financial services, or are we actually an information management business? Because if the core value creating activity across our banking business, our insurance businesses, our life business is the ability to price risk, then the competency you need for that is information management. Because the more information, the better information, you can better price that, make it really simple and compelling for customers, don't make it complex. So increasingly it makes you think like an information management business. When you think like an information management business, this stuff's really important. That's your raw material. We also look at our businesses and go, we've got one of the biggest online retailers in the country in our insurance business. We are a very big e-tailer, and if you think like an e-tailer and an information management business, you think differently about information. We've set up a team of people, our key P&L owners, that govern our data, treat it like an asset, make it more accessible. So we've had to do a lot of things. We get nowhere if we don't see this as one of the company's greatest assets. We won't invest in it. We've spent a lot of time working on what I call data in situ, which is fascinating. I mean, that's just stuff that sits there that tells you about your clients, what they bought. In our business, all of our emphasis was focused on that for a long time. It's interesting in our business, we only collect data once you buy something, which is really not that useful in a way. We spent a lot of time gaining a single view of our customers across 15 brands and all of that, which is wonderful. But it's really useful, but ultimately not mapping with that world that I spoke about. So where we're heading and where we are now is data in motion. We're trying to combine data that's fixed, i.e. products you have, with data in motion, which is what you're doing right now. And those two things together get really interesting. I'll talk about it a bit later, but we threw away the most valuable data in our business, which was what you're doing right now. We collect and spend all of our time on what you bought last year, and are you a high value customer, a low value customer, do you hold 2 products or 3 products, all very useful, but there is a whole layer of other opportunity on top of that I'd like to talk about. I'd love to talk about just a couple of mistakes that we've made and others have made. And the first is, if you don't know where you're going, you're definitely going to get there. And that's to say here, it's not a build it and they will come strategy. You've got to have some idea of what you're trying to achieve. And it might be a share of wallet play, it might be get my supply chain under control, it might be whatever, but you've got to have a pretty good view of that, and you've got to have your senior leadership team on that same bus. You've got to have that because that will make sure that you don't waste, and the opportunity for wastage here is really high. The second thing I would say is this isn't a big bang. This is not a project. This is not an implementation. This is not buy some technology and put it in. You don't have to bet the farm. This is about biting off stages, and the best way to bite off a stage is just take some data that you've got and see if you can make better decisions with that data and whether those decisions can improve a customer experience. If you can do that, you're probably going to go a long way towards understanding how to get the best out of your data. As I said, throwing away the richest data is definitely possible. So what I mean by that is we spent a lot of money and time building models to predict behaviour, and we build those models on our in situ data, which is customers that have bought something in the past. And what we're trying to do is predict behaviour. Well, there's no better way to predict behaviour than to look at behaviour. So right now, across our 15 or so brands, there will be thousands, tens of thousands of people on those websites behaving in a way that tells us a great deal about what they want. At the same time, we have thousands of phone calls coming into our contact centres where people are actually telling us, none of which are captured typically. So if we can stream data from our web experiences into a simple decision or interaction engine that, based on that behaviour, can help you find what you're looking for, or we can see you moving between our brands, we can help you find what you're looking for, get there faster, give you something that's relevant. Or if we can take all of that voice coming into our contact centres and convert it to text and then run a simple sentiment filter over that, then we can start to take a lot of this really rich data that tells us where you are in your life right now, rather than trying to build models to try and predict that. Can't do that though if you can't store it, if you can't make decisions in real time. So you need platforms to be able to do that, and you need people and culture to be able to enable it. As I've said, if there's a key in this area, I do think it is about knowing what questions to ask. Because you've got to be looking for an answer to something at the end of the day. I know there are very different views to that, and I kind of understand that. There are definitely views that if you get enough data, you just go looking for patterns. Go look for patterns in that data, and there's probably some validity in that. All I'm saying is at the early stages, that's a tough place to go. It makes a lot more sense, I think, if you know what questions you're trying to ask and really go and start to answer those and build some credibility and cadence around that. The last mistake in learning, I think, is there are some quite specialist skills required in this field, and there are some generic skills that are required. You need to start optioning those skills now. You need to have options on them, because they are very hard to find. And when I think about skills in this area, I think our options are to buy, to rent, or to build. Buying skills, when demand exceeds supply in data mining and things like that, it's quite an expensive way to do it, but we do that. We are bringing people from overseas because the market in this country is not that large. We are building. We have to build across all of our marketing teams, not just detailed data and analytics teams. We need mindsets that are much more curious, commercial, and entrepreneurial, I think. Looking for problems that customers are having that we can potentially solve, rather than just looking for patterns in the data. And the third one is renting skills. We rent skills onshore, and we rent skills with partners offshore to be able to do things faster for us. And what we found is we'll need all of those to be able to be successful in this space. Quickly, just putting it together, if it was a jigsaw, I'd put it together roughly like this. I think data is fuel. It's fuel for your business, but it's not the engine. The engine is your organisation. And there's not a lot of point having fuel with no engine, and conversely, there's no point having an engine with no fuel. Performance comes with those two coming together. But developing an organisation that can manage this and drive it and action it is quite challenging. And the thing that always challenges me is, do you build a black box? Do you put some people in a room and just let them come out with the answers and everyone else goes on with their day-to-day, marketing doesn't change outside of that microcosm? Or do you build a much more distributed world where everyone's dealing with data? And it's interesting, because I think the bigger the engine, the better. To me, it's not a lot of point, I think, over time having some fuel in a small engine meaning a small group of people that are really good at this. over time, I think it's better to have a large engine, a lot of people that are curious, asking questions, have access to information. It's structured in a way that you can get information out and do something with it, rather than waiting for an answer from that group in the cupboard next door. Combine that with cadence. I think cadence is important. Now, what I mean by that, if you do this once a year, you're not going to be very good at it. It's not really embedded in your decision making. So the best I've seen at this at the moment was in travel. And the management team in this brand that we saw every week sits down and they get all sorts of questions that their teams and their company wants to answer. And they sort through those and go, right, this week we're going to answer 3 questions. Next week they do the same. So every week they're answering 3 questions, and they just get good at the rhythm of making decisions based on data. And they're focusing on the questions that matter, and the business acumen and intuition that you need to know which ones are going to be most valuable in the market right now relative to my competitors, relative to where my customers are going, makes this pretty valuable. So getting that cadence so that you become unconsciously competent at it. We've spoken about skills. The only thing I will say there is, while optioning technical skills is important, recruiting every single role into a marketing team that is intellectually curious, is data rational, has an entrepreneurial mindset is going to be important, because this is beyond just having data mining skills. This is progressively over time having the right mentality, the right mindset to understand where to go to look. Prioritization kind of makes sense. There's a lot of things you could do. All I'm really saying here, guys, is think of it as a portfolio. You'll have 100 things that you could focus your time on in this space. 100 things, they've all got different dimensions of value and time and things like that. You kind of have to run, I think, a portfolio approach to this and prioritize use cases by some sort of value dimension in your business. Get your senior teams behind it, and then you'll be starting to make sure that where you spend your time is going to make the biggest impact. Experimentation's obvious here. This is a real test and learn environment. And I don't mean experimenting on one landing page versus another here. It's experimentation. The opportunity here is to experiment big, to be able to experiment on new customer experiences that really are likely to change the game. So continue to do all the experimentation, A/B testing online that you do now, but I think here you really want to look at disruption. You want to look at where you can play a different game to your competitors, and you want to be experimenting in that space. You want to be able to take something, if it works, you want to be able to scale it up fast. Innovation, as Creel said, I just can't get beyond it. The opportunities here to play different games, to redefine the business that you're in. Are we in financial services, or are we in e-tailer or an information management business? And I think, in a way, what we see, we either play that or someone's going to cut our lunch. Someone is going to redefine the business we're in. If you're Kodak said we are in the print photography business. Someone says, well, we're in the digital photography and sharing and connecting business. Sorry guys, your business is no more. And we think a lot about that, particularly because so many business models are built 200 years ago, and they are not giving customers what they want now. At the centre of this, as you would know though, is nothing. Where do you go? Well, what's actually in the centre of that? Not yet. Well, in the centre of that is actually privacy and trust. We don't have much time to talk about it now, but privacy and trust are your currency. Any brand, ours or anyone else's, if you overstep that line, this is good night nurse. So this is tricky. This is really, really tricky, and I find that in our business now. There is what the law tells you, and as you probably know, there are new privacy laws that will be enacted next March, which are much more stringent in the way they apply, but there's a lot of grey, particularly online, when customers are anonymous. Now, we've worked out lots of clever ways to fingerprint devices, so we can see devices moving around, we can uniquely see them, we can see when they come back, but we've got to be very careful there because customers also have a right to be anonymous. And this is a grey area that's very hard. So when we think about where to go here, we think about, if we start by solving a customer problem, if our intention is to solve a customer problem, and what we're doing is trying to provide an experience that's going to better satisfy that customer, if we're transparent about that, we're probably going to be heading down the right path. But over the top of that is a social media test. If what you're doing doesn't feel like it's okay and would feel very uncomfortable if it's taken to social or on the front page of a newspaper, then it's probably not the right thing to do, even if it's the legal thing to do. And so there's quite a bit of challenge, I think, we'll find as we go through this over the next couple of years, not just what's legal, but what consumers feel is okay. If you're tracking them online and popping offers to them and that are highly relevant but feels creepy, that's going to be difficult to manage. So I think there's a whole lot of learning for us to see yet in that area. Just to finish, if you play this forward, it kind of does raise the question of whether data takes over a lot of what is the art of marketing. So is the art gone, and does data spell the end of ideas? And I'll just leave you with three perspectives, I think, on that. I think human insight and human acumen is going to be more important in this world, not less. While, as I said before, you are going to need machine learning, you're going to need big decisions to be made very quickly in your business. That's not the same thing as saying that you do not need to know what problems you're solving. So what worries me a lot is that you could get 2 years into a program like this and dumb down your marketing. You could dumb down your teams because you're assuming that the data gives you all of the answers, your algorithms that are driving your machine learning online are going to do all of that, and in a way, you can take the intelligence out of your marketing. So my view is you're going to need more intelligence than ever, but it's going to be more like Creel described. It's going to need to be commercial, rigorously commercial, because you have 1,000 decisions you could make, and it needs to be entrepreneurial, because someone else is going to be doing exactly what you're doing. You're going to have to do it just a little bit better. So I think we're going to need more human insight there, not less. The second thing is, I don't know. Look, I don't see any data, any information, or any insight that tells me people don't want to continue to be entertained, engaged, inspired. I don't see anything that tells me that. In fact, have a little, someone who has a little smile at some part of their day, or a little bit of humour, that stuff's pretty important. So while I think data will help shape where those ideas come from. Data has a role to play that says, look, we really think this is a motivation, here's a part of the experience that really needs to be attended to. So I think data can tell you where you might need to focus some of your ideation, but will not replace it. And it's those two things together, ideas that inspire and engage with data that is personalised and real-time and across channels. When you put that stuff together, you come up with experiences that hopefully people want to engage with, and hopefully they choose your brand. The last thing I would say is data gives a great view of the what's going on, and data science is the discipline that you will see for the next 3 or 4 years that will grow exponentially around that. But I can't help thinking that the missing piece is the social science that needs to intersect with that, because social science will give us the why. We are still analog beings, and trying to understand why people behave the way that they do is critical. So the intersection between data science and social science, I think, is going to be critical over the next few years. So if you're thinking about these programs in your business, it's worth thinking about how you get that balance right between data science and social science, the what and the how, because that's going to be really important. So I guess at the end of all of this, my perspective, guys, for debate and discussion is that it will be the intersection between data science and social science that will ultimately mean that your brand and your business reigns supreme, not data. Ultimately, that's the game, that you navigate through all of this disruption and your business stays supreme, not data. So, thank you.